Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fifth webinar in this series, all about Kata coaching. So we've taken each one of the steps in the improvement Kata and done a deep dive webinar on each of those steps. Today, we have several people from Kata School Cascadia here: Tracy, Mark, Jennifer. I'll turn it over to you, Tracy, to get us started in experimenting.
Thank you, Maria. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tracy Defoe, and as Maria said, I'm one of the Kata coaches and principals at Kata School Cascadia. It is my pleasure today to present the fifth in our six-part Kata coaching webinar series for the AME West region. I'd like to thank the AME for partnering us with this. We've been really heartened and excited by the interest and participation people have shown. So let's go. So the coaching conversation. This is a diagram of the improvement kata beside the coaching kata and how it works. In the classic way that it is presented, it is a coach and learner improver duo who work through the planning phase of coaching and the planning phase of making improvement, understanding where you're trying to go, get a good grasp of the current condition, setting a next target condition. And where are we now today? Finally, we are in step 4, what Mike Rother called the executing phase, which one of my coaches used to call the striving phase, and is the getting stuff done towards improvement learning phase. You can see at the below that the corresponding versions of a coaching card with the standard questions that the coach asks. And over here on the right, just a reminder that one of the most important parts of the improvement kata and of the coaching cycle is when we stop and reflect on what we learn from what has just happened. Let's talk a little bit about why. What is the purpose of the coaching kata? You got people putting the effort into questions and tracking and run charts. Kata coaching isn't necessarily all about the structures that Mike Rother called the starter kata, or the things to use to begin. We use those structures and we use the routines to teach the thinking pattern. And we practice that until it is our default thinking pattern, until we have the habit of that, what Mike now calls the scientific thinking pattern. So the whole purpose is to get that new pattern into your brain. Why does Kata work? I gave a whole talk about this that you could find on the Kata School Cascadia YouTube channel, but I'll just give you a little brief thought about it. I think the next question is to do what? Like, what do we want it to do? And for me, and I think for most of the Kata community with a lot of experience, the Kata coaching pattern works to teach and develop a habit of deliberate, methodical, curiosity, and hypothesis-driven way to tackle tough challenges together and achieve things we didn't think were possible. I mean, we're into this to do the hard stuff and to be deliberate, methodical, but curious and hypothesis driven. So I want to offer you my coach's view of experimenting. As a coach, my reference for planning a step or an experiment includes these 5 things: that it's linked to the obstacle that the improver has identified. We talked about obstacles last time. That is clearly described with enough detail, maybe so that I could do it, or at least somebody understands exactly what's going to happen. So the improver has thought it through. That whatever they're expecting to learn, then they put in that expecting part of the experimenting record is related to the process metric or to the operating pattern or to something else that I can get behind needs to happen. That the step is in scope of control of the learner. I can't get things done if I rely on other people too much. And of course, that it's small enough to get done today. We're going to look at the record, but those are some of the things I have in mind, and you might want to keep in mind. So this is actually the storyboard we saw during last time's webinar. And this is the experimenting record over here, where our improver Mark, who's working on the faucet assembly cell, outlined his next step with his coach Maria. So let's observe their coaching cycle. Mark is being coached by Maria on the challenge to produce 700 faucets a day without overtime by July 31st. Last time, Mark set a target condition and identified a step. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark and Maria now to give us the first of the 2 coaching cycles that we will see today.
Okay. Hi, Mark. Are you ready for a coaching cycle?
I am.
Super. What is your challenge?
So my challenge remains that we have to get to 700 faucets a day without any overtime by the end of July. And we're working on that so that we can meet our customer needs and so we can get our weekends and evenings back.
Awesome. And what is your target condition?
So my target condition by May 29th is I want Alice's lowest repeatable time to not exceed the 40-second tack time. If we do that, I think we'll get to consistently getting 600 faucets a day before overtime. So it's not all the way there, but it's incremental. I don't see any fundamental changes to the work
Mhm.
breakdown or operating pattern that are needed to get there right now.
Okay. What is your actual condition now?
So our actual condition now is we continue to flirt with 600 faucets a day, but we're
Mhm.
not getting there consistently. Um, and as a result of my last step, I did a detailed, kind of a detailed, this is more the layout than the block diagram, but this is Alice's current work cycle. And I did a detailed time study. And so what I've got here, the times I'm using are all the times that where uh, there weren't variation, where the work was consistent. And I broke down the timeline on the standard work combination sheet, and it comes out to consistently we're getting 42 seconds as a lowest repeatable time. So I've got a pretty good idea what's going on.
Great. What did you plan as your last step?
So as my last step, I was going to do this detailed time study.
And what did you expect?
I expected to learn about the sources of waste and motion and variation.
And what actually happened?
Well, I did that, and I really looked at the differences between the lowest repeatable work cycles and the variation cycles where there was variation.
And what did you learn?
What I learned was that her the fastest she can go is 39 seconds. That's the fastest work cycle I saw, and that was when everything was really, really smooth for her. There was no hiccups at all.
Mhm.
I did confirm that my first pass of her lowest repeatable time is around 42 seconds. She can get that pretty consistently. But I also saw there are not likely going to be any home runs here. We're going to have to dig out the improvement we need.
Okay, what obstacles do you think are preventing you from reaching your target condition?
I've got a few. One is that the layout itself introduces 3 seconds of return walk time and a little more walk going down line. Um, if I'm looking at her individual steps, there's a lot of distance between the step installing the O-ring and where she in the jig assembly jig, and that adds another 2 seconds of walking. Reaching for the cover adds another second or two to the lowest repeatable time. Um, Occasionally she's rejecting top covers, and every time she has to do that, we have another 2 seconds. And then there's general out of cycle work like paperwork, and sometimes she has some cross threads she has to
Mhm.
redo and a little rework. And those all add between 2 and 15 seconds of variation.
Good. So, which one are you addressing now?
So I want to work on that layout.
Okay. And what is your next step?
So my next step is that I am going to set up a really compact U-shaped layout for her operation.
And what are you expecting?
I'm expecting that her lowest repeatable time will go down to 39 seconds at most and maybe a little more.
And how quickly can we go and see what you've learned from this step?
So that's going to be a lot of work. I should have that done by the end of next week.
Hmm. That seems like a really big step.
Well, there's a lot
Um,
involved. Yeah.
do you think do you think there's a smaller step that you could take?
Um,
Maybe we could go back to
Maybe.
your obstacle list
Yeah. Okay.
and look there.
Let's okay. So I look at, yeah, okay. So I could certainly, I mean, this one where she's just reaching, that's something that we could probably knock out pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
cool. So let's back up. What obstacle or what one obstacle are you addressing now?
Okay, so I'm going to address that reaching for the cover obstacle because that actually has something to do with the layout too. So that might be a good first step there.
Good. Um, so what is your next step?
Okay, so I think then if I'm working on reaching
Mhm.
for the cover, I want to move that big box of covers down to closer to the point of use and put it right behind her jig.
And what do you expect?
I expect a shorter reach and I expect to take a second or two off of her lowest repeatable time.
How quickly can we go and see what you've learned from this step?
Actually, that should only take me a couple of hours to try out, so we can even look at that later today.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mark.
As far as we know, this has never been attempted on a live Zoom before, so I'm very happy with how that went. And I have a question for you. What did you observe in the coaching cycle? So, do we have anything in the chat?
We have a couple in the chat now. That was such a smooth and fast cycle. It hasn't gone that well for me in real life. And then there was another comment about the course correction on a long step choice.
Yes, Coach Maria, what was going through your head there where you asked that question?
Well, for one thing, it was just a big step, and I was trying to get Mark to commit to something that we could check in on sooner.
Hmm.
That's one piece of it, and then the other piece was I noticed that he had much more specific details in his obstacle list, and then he chose the one that was kind of generic out of all of them.
Mhm. Yes, that's great. Okay, we're going to have one more time. We're hoping to hear from Mark after he makes that step. So while he's off doing that step, let me talk to you a little bit more about experimenting. And specifically, I want to just walk through right now that experimenting record, also known in, at least at my house, as the learning record. This is the one that Mark showed us, or at least his one from last time. And what's it for? It documents the step, the expectation, and the results that the improver or learner is taking every day. It records what we are learning. And I said we because the coach is also learning. It helps the coach see the logic in the learner's thinking. I think this is a really overlooked part by people starting out. We're looking for some logical links. One of my coaches used to call it the golden thread across that line because each single horizontal line of the form is a single experiment. And having this structure makes the method easier to learn, at least in my opinion. So this is Mike Rother's original diagram from the practice guide. And this is the classic experimenting record. You list your obstacle up here, your process that you're working on, learner and coach names. And we have basically two sides, left side, right side to the document. This side on the left happens before you do the step. So it's your prediction side. What's the date? What's your step? What do you expect to happen from taking that step? What do you expect to learn? What do you expect to be different than it was before? Notice here in the middle, in this form, it's green. There's sometimes you see them in different colors. This is where you do a coaching cycle and you take the step. And then on the right side, after you've done the step, what happened? You record your data. What did you get that second, Mark? Did something else happen? And then you evaluate or reflect, what did we learn? The very original form, Mike Rother actually called the PDCA form. This is a P, plan or predict, D for do, C for check, and then evaluate. That's the original form. And it goes across one line. So one step, one line. There's lots of variations on the form. This is the form that Tilo Schwartz uses in the Kata Coaching Dojo. That's why it says Kata Jet at the top. And I just thought I'd mention he's just formatted a little bit different than the original. One is he puts the number of the current condition for the process metric or the process indicator. He also puts the obstacle here, and then the step and the effect are up and down. So that you'll just see, and here's when we'll take our step. More variations. Although I'm a big proponent of the paper storyboard, these days people are probably working on digital form. So here's a couple examples of that where on a mural or Miro digital board, you just take that original form, put it on your board, and then you use the sticky notes to put your step and your reflection. This is another one where they've recreated the boxes and made their own little version of the form. This is a Miro template that comes from Tucker Cass, and you can see he got a little artsy. He calls it the Climb Kata board, and it has kind of a visual representation of your route to the challenge. And a little close-up on the experimenting record part, you can see obstacle, date, next step, what do you expect, 2 stickies for what actually happened, and 2 more for what did you learn. All of those things are pretty easy to find, and we are pretty happy to share with you any of those that you want. So just as the overall improvement kata pattern is predictable, and we looked at that already, we can predict what we expect from the steps from the experimenting record, right? You don't want to take a step that takes you into the unknown. You want to have a predictable step. Here's a little table about predicting the steps. And again, this is a coach's reference. So if you're coaching, you're talking about steps and experiments, you don't want to be stepping into the unknown. You want to have a good idea of what do you expect your improver learner to tell you. So when we don't know what the obstacle is, then the step that we can expect is to try to run the operating pattern in your target condition to observe the process and identify obstacles. And if that's your step, then pretty logically, your expectation is we're going to identify some obstacles. I put an X in there. I usually say 2 or 3 obstacles, but I would accept 1 obstacle if we're new. And then in the second line, okay, if we know what the obstacle is, it's on our obstacle list, as we just saw Mark share. Then we want to observe the process as we run the target condition and get some kind of measurement on the effect of that obstacle on the process metric. This might take several times, right? So, and our expectation then is that we're going to start to measure the effect of that obstacle on our process metric and target condition. Okay, but if we know the obstacle and we know the effect it's having on our target condition, then what? Well, then we might want to understand the cause. So what is causing it? Begin to identify the cause. Again, this step could go on a couple times. So you're not going to get it on the first try, perhaps. And then finally, if you know the obstacle, you understand the effect it's having in your target condition, and you have an idea of the cause, then you could make a change and try a solution. And what I think we just saw with Mark is very typical of improvers. We're an action-oriented society and we're used to getting things done. And some of us know a whole bunch of lean solutions to different problems. And so there's a real tendency to want to skip ahead to making a change and trying a solution without actually understanding what effect the obstacle's having or what's causing it. So I give credit to Thilo Schwartz from the Kata Dojo. We teach this in the Kata Dojo Masterclass. And here's the actual slide from the Kata Dojo Masterclass. We call this the fortune teller's crystal ball, that the coach will understand what to expect. Thilo calls those ones where you're looking for the obstacle and the effect. He calls those type 1s. And he's pretty predictable what we expect to see on the experimenting record or what we expect to hear. If we have the obstacle and the unwanted effect, then we're going to do a type 2 and look for cause. And then we'd expect to understand it, or at least to have some data around it. And then, as I just said, the third one, we know the obstacle, we know how it's affecting our target condition operating pattern, we understand the cause, then we test a solution or an idea to remove the cause. And we would expect then that's what people would say they're going to do and have the result in finding. One of the assignments in the masterclass for the dojo is actually to go back and look at your own experimenting records to see how often you jump ahead to testing a solution before you understand the obstacle. And pretty much everybody finds type 1 experiments and then this type 3. So the coach is always listening for that threshold of knowledge and evaluating the logic links through the step. And if the improver's not sure, then the safest thing to do is to stop there at the threshold of knowledge and move on to the coaching question 4 and say, don't worry if you don't know. What is your next step to find out? because steps to find out are always great steps. And I don't know is always a really good answer. This is a digital Kata storyboard by a learner named Arissa. She was an amazingly organized and artistic person, and I thought I'd just show you that on her storyboard, Arissa is using that experimenting record and just putting stickies with notes there. She also has her previous ones stored up here. But what I really wanted to show you was her other learning. So besides what did you learn from your step, she documented what we call micro learnings or small bursts of new knowledge. And she's organized them. What did she learn from step one when she was understanding the challenge or direction? What did she learn during step two? What she was grasping her current condition. And then you can see establishing the next target condition, little things she learned, most of them not too super profound. And then as she was experimenting towards her next target condition, a whole bunch of learnings here in blue. And finally, what did you learn overall about the improvement kata? And she's got them there. So the micro learning, if that's new for you, try to grab and document what you're learning. Can really enhance your learning as you go. And also, it helps you share more knowledge with your coach. And the more the coach understands about what you're learning, the better job they'll do. Oh, look, Mark's back. It's time for another coaching cycle. Last time, Maria coached Mark to right size his step. Now Mark took that step. Let's find out what happened and what did he learn. Once again, I'm asking you to observe the cycle and share with us what you observe.
Hello, Mark. Are we ready for another coaching cycle?
I think so.
Okay. What is your target condition?
My target condition is I want by May 29th, Alice's lowest repeatable time to be consistently at or below 40 seconds. And I think if we get there, we can get to 600 faucets consistently.
Great. What is your actual condition now?
There's no change in the output and really no change in the overall work cycle. What I did see was that as a result of the experiment, there was a opportunity to cut a couple of seconds out of her lowest repeatable time. So I just kind of made some hand edits on that just to show maybe where that might be going.
Great. What did you plan as your last step?
As my last step, my plan was to move the cover box down toward and put it in point of use by the jig.
And what did you expect?
I expected Alice's reach to be a second or less.
And what actually happened?
What actually happened was that the material handling and material distribution stuff behind the line is really big and awkward. And so just to test the idea, what I did was I grabbed a bunch of the covers and I just put them behind the point of use, essentially where that box would be, and allowed Alice to run some cycles.
Okay. What did you
And
learn?
I learned was what I predicted was that if we have them in the right place, that we'd save a couple of seconds in her cycle. Oh, the other thing, yeah, I learned was let's not try to outrun our headlights too much here, and let's just stay focused on one improvement at a time.
Cool. So what obstacles do you think are preventing you from reaching your target condition?
So the obstacles remain the same. I've still got this messy layout. We still got the distance between the O-ring and the jig. We've still got the reaching because that's still embedded in the process. We just ran a test, and we've still got rejects happening, and we've still got all that out of cycle work.
Okay, which one are you addressing now?
I'm staying focused on removing that reaching time.
And what is your next step?
So my next step is now I want to move the jig and the tool upstream to actually leave the box where it is and just put the work at where the parts are, because that big box is harder to move than the little ones.
Okay, what do you expect?
I expect to eliminate not only the reach, but also to eliminate, you can see it here, 2 seconds or so of even walking past the box.
Mhm.
So I expect her lowest repeatable time to actually start to flirt with 40 seconds now.
Cool. How quickly can we go and see what you've learned from taking that step?
I should be able to be ready to talk about that tomorrow.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark and Maria. Once again, please, if you notice something, we'd love to hear about it in the chat.
Well, Jennifer said the conversation becomes so succinct. And then we had a couple of others, even from the last time, about redirecting back to the obstacles and changing the experiment to something that could be completed in a shorter time frame.
Yeah, and did you notice that this time Mark's proposed step can be completed in the time frame? So maybe he
Mhm.
learned that his coach is interested in that. So, coaching somebody to do the experiments, is it all just about the questions? I mean, I think we've all heard people say, I'm pretty familiar with PDCA. The questions seem pretty easy. Is that what it's about? So, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about why the learning is about more than just the questions. There's a couple of really good adult education structures built into the Kata practice. One of them is this idea that you build your own knowledge. This is called constructivism. You build literally from scratch, according to what you already know, perhaps through something like this process of going through the pattern repeatedly, having the same questions, being asked about logical links, perhaps working in a group and recording those micro learnings, learning together. And certainly in the conversation with your coach, you slowly build your understanding of what this means and how to do it. And that notion that we make our own knowledge on the edge of what we already know is really central to adult education. Another thing that's happening in the learning side of why the Kata works is that the coach is focused on understanding the thinking that the learner has and how to enrich it and support it. And the coach is looking for the learning zone. So they're looking for the edge of what the learner knows about the process, but also the edge of what the learner might know about the method of improvement. And if you can get there, what you might learn about yourself as somebody who's participating in this in the kata and also reflecting. In this way, Mark likes to say the learner is the teacher. The improver is teaching the coach about their process and what they understand. And also, a really common and important principle of adult education is over time we give less support. So, over time, the learner might become a coach, but they also might be able to be way more autonomous in how they propose. You'll see way more focused steps, way better learning, way better reworded obstacles. The opposite of this, and something you may have experienced in your education, is called banking education. And that's where your teacher has set knowledge that's already in a book, and they do their darndest to get it from their book or their head over to your head. So this banking education is way less popular now. And if you have kids in school, you will know that they do lots of maybe project-based things, autonomous research, and things that is no longer the case where rote memorization and we already know everything, kid, stick this in your own brain is the case. So we're into constructivism. The improvement kata and coaching kata also offer a structure for what we would call unlearning and undoing. So if you already have a big knowledge of continuous improvement, but you've never tried to coach and involve people in this way, you may have some habits to unlearn. And the method for unlearning or learning something new while you unlearn what you knew before requires a few things. One of them is precision of thought, which we currently have for sure in the coaching kata and improvement kata. The notion of an alternative concept, so a different way to win this game isn't to do it all myself, but to have other people participate and learn. And of course, time. So the repetition, the daily practice. If you're interested in that, you can take a photo of this slide because the ABCs of how we learn, which I believe comes out of Stanford University, is a pretty good look at all the scientifically proven approaches to adults and how they learn and what to do about them. I also wanted to mention that in kata coaching, it's quite possible to use something like the experimenting record or some of the tools of the improvement kata to get better at your coaching. So some of the things that we tend to look at is the time you spend on each question, and you can do a run chart for that. How much you talk versus how much the improver talks. So the talk time, I aim to talk no more than about 15% of any conversation as a coach. The bookends of the coaching conversation. So what happens before as you set the comfort mood of talking? What happens after? So you can build relationships and develop people just through what happens before and after the coaching conversation. You can get better at being specific about each learner's learning zone. You can also keep track of the actual words you say compared to what you meant to say, especially if you stray off the card. And you can keep track of yours and your learner's progress in scientific thinking. Are you being methodical? Are you being data driven? And a good resource for this, if you're interested in it, is Doug Lemov's Practice Perfect book, Rules for Getting Better at Getting Better, which is one of the inspirations for how we do the Kata Coaching Dojo. The final thing that's built into the kata that I think supports the learning is the idea that small steps can over time give big results. And there's a lot of cognitive-based therapy and habit science behind it. So some of the big ones, we have a routine, we track our data, and we have rewards, even if the reward is just the feeling of making progress. If you are getting started and you don't have a coach, but you want to get familiar with the pattern and start to develop the habit, you can just get a blank experimenting record and start to use it. You want to learn something, you want to change something, you want to meet a goal, you can get the habit. You can fill in the things by asking yourself the questions. There is power in using the pattern. I've known lots of people, for example, who've decided they wanted to change their morning huddle, and they just started taking a step, making a prediction or an expectation, and then writing down what actually happened. And the iterative learning of that is already quite powerful. We hear all the time now from people who use the coaching kata and the experimenting record away from a storyboard. You can use the questions in meetings, whether your meeting is a friendly little meeting of three, as you can see Maria and I with Tucker Cass. But a lot of people meet, as we see on the right, in a glass cage in the dark with some people on Zoom. And it doesn't matter what kind of meeting you're in, you can just start to keep track and try to make a change. You could write, in this meeting, I want to really encourage Maria to speak. She never speaks in our meetings. So I'm going to prompt her with nonverbal cues. I'm going to try to draw her out just by my body language. Here's what I expect. I expect I'll get her to talk at least once. Okay, what actually happened, Tracy, after you took that step? Write it down. This is a kind of almost like journaling, but you'd be surprised how that little wheel starts to turn and you start to make progress. And maybe you'll feel more prepared to be a coach. Also, in that coaching relationship when you're learning, I just thought I'd put up this quote from Fortune. She was new to the kata and was being coached, and she said she found a lot more kindness and empathy than you get from reading the books. You know, kata coaching or any coaching is a human activity. And I think giving yourself some grace about struggling a little bit, or if you're a coach, being a bit empathetic and kind to your learner will get you a long way towards getting an honest, safe answer and maybe some real thinking on those learning records. I want to leave you for sure with this thought from John Dewey, who is an American educator and philosopher, and famously said, "We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience." And I think this is, for me, this is like the heart of the coaching. I don't want to ever skip the what did we learn and what else did you learn? And oh, I think you just said another thing. Take credit for that. Write it down. You learned something else. I think the power of reflecting on learning cannot be understated. And in our super busy world, I want to urge you to not outsource this thinking. I have had at least one learner tell me that, yeah, they fed everything on their experimenting record into a large language model and asked it what it learned. No, I want you to think about and maybe struggle a little bit to express what you learned, because that way you will remember it and it will stick and you'll be able to build a foundation to go forward. So yes, you learn from reflecting on experience. Okay, so we're almost at question time. I just wanted to mention, as we probably have every single time, With this QR code, you can join the Kata School Cascadia Free Friday Community Zooms. Every Friday since the fall of 2019, we have met at lunchtime. It is just an open forum. You can ask coaching questions. You can ask us to explain this experimenting record. You can show up and ask for any kind of help. We are just there as a community to support each other. And we have a lot of fun. And I have some time for questions. Over to you, Maria.
Jennifer said, since there was an obstacle with a big step, any tips for helping the learner break it down smaller? Should they dig in and really want to do that big obstacle?
I wonder if Mark, do you want to talk about that since it was your big step?
Yeah. That's where it's a little bit case by case. Sometimes let them dry it if it's not going to be a really long time. Okay, in my case, I said I'm going to have it done in a week and a half. But if they're going to get it done tomorrow, but it's really, really big, there's a great learning opportunity there. They're likely not to have a lot of success if they try to knock it out with one big step. So let's wait for the process to function. Hey, what did we learn? Oh, well, maybe I should have broken that down. That then opens the conversation up from the learner about how to break it down rather than me as a coach saying, yeah, that's wrong. So I always would bias toward allowing them to discover on their own, as long as it's not going to hurt the process of improvement.
I also think if I can just add to that, so maybe eventually there does need to be a U-shaped cell there to make it kind of flow better and to cut down the wasted walking or whatever. Um, but one of the things I always think is useful is to ask, like, okay, what preparation steps do we have to do? Could you do to get ready? Or what do you need to know before you start breaking down the cell? And frequently there's a whole bunch of things either that you would do as soon as you were ready to go or that you need to do. Like, I think there's probably a permission aspect. I think you'd meet with a team. I think you might want to measure stuff. I think you might want to talk to parts. Like, there's probably even on the way of U-shaped cell might be a target condition or something, but on the way, there's going to be all kinds of steps. And so as a coach, I would ask questions about those steps. Maria redirected him to a different obstacle that was doable during the day. Also a possibility. Any advice when you know the learner is going to have a painful discovery? Empathy and kindness, I think, and maybe helping reframe it as something around the learning, because you win, you achieve your target condition or you would learn, and we celebrate the learning. So I think trying to keep it in the learning celebration zone is a good thing. And is there a step that evaluates the risks of a change?
Can I chime in there? I think
Yes, I was
both
going
of
to say, I
them
think you have an answer to that.
they're answered with really the same question, which is pushing in on what do you think's going to happen?
Hmm.
And getting them to think through cause and effect. If I take this action, what is the impact going to have? What could happen? And just keep working to have them predict and play out in their mind what the movie looks like if they actually took that step.
I think I've heard you say, what do you think the company might be concerned about that? Or what do you think your teammates might have
Yeah,
concerns about that step in
yeah,
order to get them
yeah.
to articulate the risks? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a question I've heard and used as a coach, especially if you're in authority. What might concern me about that? And just letting them think through that. And then they learn to think like the boss.
Our next webinar is actually June 16th. Um, and it's called What to Expect as a Coach or Learner. We're going to try to pull it all together. And Mark, Maria, and I will all be back. So if you don't know Yeti, what you're going to do about Kata coaching, I think you'd be great to have you join us. Thank you for coming. And we appreciate the big turnout. And we'll be back in 4 weeks.